Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Welcome to the Fiscal Year 14 Second Chance Act Reentry Program for Adult Offenders with Co-Occurring Substance Abuse and Mental Disorders Grantees. This is Sarah Wurzburg. I'm a policy analyst in behavioral health on the substance abuse team at the Justice Center. And also with me, we have
Mark Stovall, Program Associate in Behavioral Health at the Justice Center.
And Mark, you've all received welcome emails from, as well as working with him to set up your orientation calls for your grant. And later on in the webinar, we'll also have two individuals speaking from the Center for Advancing Correctional Excellence, or ACE, at George Mason University, Dr. Faye Taxman and Amy Murphy. So just to give you a little bit of Sorry, go ahead.
No, Amy and I were just going to say hello.
So thanks to them for joining us and talking about an exciting opportunity that we have available to the co-occurring disorder grantees. So just to begin with, we'll tell you a little bit more about the Council of State Governments Justice Center. And I know you all heard a little bit about the Justice Center on the webinar earlier this week, which was the Bureau of Justice Assistance Orientation webinar. And this webinar is more specifically related to content for the grant track for the co-occurring disorder grantees. The Justice Center, the Council of State Governments Justice Center, is a national nonprofit organization. We focus on bipartisan policy solutions for all three branches of government, and we work with state and local policymakers to give practical advice informed by the best available evidence. So on this slide, we have a couple of so in addition to providing training and technical assistance, we also produce some products, one of which is the Adults with Behavioral Health Needs Under Correctional Supervision, a shared decision guide. And so these are all just kind of tools and products that we have available. And through your technical assistance work, we'll talk a little bit more about some of those things that we have available to you. So the CSG Justice Center is a Second Chance Act grantee, just like you are. And through that, we were awarded the ability to run the National Reentry Resource Center. And so the Second Chance Act was authorized in April of 2008, and about a year later, the Council of State Governments Justice Center got the contract to run the National Reentry Resource Center, or NRRC, as we like to call it. And this is all administered through a partnership with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. So through this work, we've worked with over 600 grantees to date working on adult reentry, and we've worked with a total of 49 individuals and grantees in 49 different states. So an overview of what we'll talk about today, I'll give an introduction to the fiscal year 14 co-occurring disorder grantees, talk a little bit about everyone that's on the call today. We'll begin a discussion of the co-occurring disorder, or the COD, planning and implementation guide. And this will really just briefly touch on this, and then when we have the orientation calls and further work with your technical assistance provider, we'll also go into greater depth then about the COD planning and implementation guide, or the P&I guide as we like to call it. Then we'll talk about the RNR Simulation Tool pilot sites. And so that's where we'll bring in the individuals from George Mason to talk a little bit more about the RNR Simulation Tool, a little bit of background on what that is and the pilot site opportunity. And then at the end, we're going to leave time for questions and answers. If you do have any questions as the webinar goes on, you notice on your right there's a chat box, and you can feel free to enter any questions, and we'll work towards answering all of your questions at the end of the webinar. Okay, so for the fiscal year co-occurring disorder grantees, so we have We have 12 total grantees. We have 3 state grantees, which are Essex County Sheriff's Department, the Louisiana Department of EPS&C, Iowa Department of Corrections, and then at the local level, we have Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health, the City of Wilmington, Montgomery County, Jackson County, Douglas County, Jefferson County Commission, the County of Cumberland, Pima County Office of Medical Services, and Rockdale County, Georgia. So those are your fellow grantees. So to talk a little bit more about the orientation process, so on Monday we had the Bureau of Justice Assistance orientation webinar, and then today we're having the co-occurring disorder specific orientation webinar, and then Mark sent out emails to all of you to set up a orientation call with the CSG Justice Center, and we'll talk a little bit more about what technical assistance looks like on those orientation calls as well. So there's 3 major organizations that as a Second Chance Act grantee you'll be communicating with, one of which is the National Reentry Resource Center, which is run by the CSG Justice Center. And our role in this is really to provide training and technical assistance, and how we do that is you'll be assigned a technical assistance provider. So there will be a staff member who will be your main point of contact at the Justice Center. And through that, you'll have monthly calls with that technical assistance provider, and we'll also do site visits to grantees as well. And so we're not necessarily able to do site visits to every grantee, but we certainly try to prioritize based on needs of the systems and how we can be a value add to your program. We're also able, through the monthly calls, in addition to doing check-ins, provide in-depth technical assistance on specific issues and use our consultant tools to really try to provide targeted technical assistance. And again, we'll discuss that process more on the orientation calls as well. Another organization that you'll be hearing a lot from is the Bureau of Justice Assistance. So on the call on Monday, the orientation call, BJA was the primary presenter for that call, and of course they are the funders of the Second Chance Act. And each of you will have a contact there called a state policy advisor, or as they call it, a SPA. And those are regionally based individuals who will be your point of contact at BJA. If any of you are not sure who that point of contact is at BJA, you can feel free to email us, and we're happy to help connect you or provide that information. And the way BJA, you'll work with them is if you have any budget or grant adjustment notices, then you will go in through their system and contact your state policy advisors in order to make those changes. The other organization that you'll work with as a Second Chance Act grantee is called CSR Inc., and the Performance Measurement Tool, or PMT, which is the data and information that you'll enter on a quarterly basis into a data collection system or a portal online, is all administered through CSR. So all of those PMT type questions you'll work with CSR on. Okay, so to talk a little bit about the co-occurring disorder planning and implementation guide. So this year, the co-occurring disorder grants they're set up as 2-year grants. The first year, as outlined in the solicitation, is a planning phase, and the second year is an implementation phase. So the planning and implementation guide, which you should have already received, has exercises associated with each of these phases, and there's a suggested timeline of how to complete this within the year process for the planning phase. If a grantee is looking to alter that timeline and try to do the planning phase in less than a year, we can work with you, the TA provider can work with you to alter that time frame to make it something so it works for you. The planning part of this P&I guide, the planning and implementation guide, will be submitted to BJA as it said in the solicitation. So your TA provider will work with you on that to make sure that has everything it needs before it's submitted to BJA. And how that will look is on each of the calls, we'll go through about 2 to 3 different exercises from the planning guide to discuss those sections. So prior to each of the calls, you'll have, so for example, for the first call, maybe sections 1, 2, and exercises 1, 2, and 3. You'll fill out, you'll send it to your TA provider prior to the call, and then on the call, you'll review and discuss each of the sections to make sure, there's an understanding on both sides of everything that's going on. So how do you use this guide? So really the goal of this guide is to help the grantees. So all of the things that the guide touches on are things that have come up with past grantees that would be helpful or useful to know. So it's really a way to identify things that you're doing well as areas that you need additional assistance on. So any of the challenges are potential for technical assistance. It will also create opportunity for discussions amongst grantees. So the TA provider, may see a theme of a lot of individuals are asking about a specific topic, such as family engagements, and that gives us the ability to have conversations with multiple grantees and do peer-to-peer learning on those topics. Or if there's one subject that you as a grantee are really good at, perhaps you can talk to another grantee who's struggling with that specific issue. So it's really to try to promote the exchange of ideas, and so we can look at grantees across the site. So to talk a little bit more about the first phase, or the first year of the grant, which is the planning phase. So the available uses of funds for the planning phase are laid out here, and these are the same that were laid out in the solicitation. So strategic planning for the Affordable Care Act, developing an integrated care model, a continuum of care model as well. So strategic planning and trying to work towards long-term sustainability. So these are the allowable uses that BJA laid out for this grant. So for this planning section, it's really a capacity building to make sure that you're able to engage your stakeholders and look holistically at the strengths and needs of your grants. We'll use this to target the TA and increasing the exchange of ideas amongst all of the grantees. So the process I talked a little bit about before, but on your end, I think the ideal process would be to get together the group of stakeholders who were involved in, writing the solicitation or who are involved in the implementation of this grant, and really honestly and accurately try to fill out the planning and implementation guide so we can really identify those strengths and weaknesses of each grantee. The answers are meant to be brief. You don't have to write 5 pages in each of the blank sections, but certainly want to be able to get an idea of what you're doing on each of those. As I mentioned prior to the monthly calls, you'll work towards filling out some of the exercises, send it to your TA provider, and then as things get updated and as the phases go on, you can also update those exercises so it can be used as a record to see improvement as well. So there, in the planning phase, there are 3 different sections. The first section is about developing collaborative strategies and establishing justice and treatment program teams. So a lot of that is stakeholder engagement and things along those lines. And then the second section is on incorporating evidence-based principles for reducing recidivism and promoting recovery. And the third section is on data collection, evaluation, and sustainability. So to give you an idea what's in each of these sections, Section 1 is the background information, talking about the work group and the team that you have who's working on it, looking at the vision and mission of your program and making sure that matches to the target population as well as the proposed implementation strategies. And then thinking about other partners that you could engage that you haven't engaged. For example, you're realizing that housing might be a real issue for this population. Well, how can you engage transitional housing providers and bring them to the table so they're at these work group meetings to further discuss and further enhance services for the individuals reentering. Section 2 talks about really looking at the recidivism rate, how you're defining that in your grant and how you're tracking it, the target population, so making sure that the target population identified is still being met and what the eligibility criteria is prior to the implementation phase, so making sure that there's clear criteria of who will be enrolled in the program and, you know, how they become eligible, and if there are any exclusionary factors, what those will be, as well as looking at screening and assessment and services that are provided while the individual is, you know, incarcerated, as well as when they reenter back into the community. The other piece of this section talks about some larger issues, such as healthcare coverage and benefits, staff qualifications, and looking at the transition process. So really how that connection, you know, from in the facility to into the community works in a seamless way, and trying to improve that process. The third section is talking about data collection and evaluation, how you're sharing that data, how you're measuring that data, really looking at the sustainability piece. So the way that we found grantees are most successful at sustainability is really having a plan from the outset of the grant. So then you have these 2 years to work towards building a case to sustaining the program. Okay, so the implementation phase. So the use of funds for the implementation phase, this slide is again directly from the solicitation that you responded to. So determining things like determining dosage and intensity of services, providing integrated care, looking at the evidence-based practices for community supervision, enhancing intrinsic motivation, collecting the recidivism rate and reporting it as an indicator, and targeting high-risk offenders. So the implementation section is very different from the planning section. It is an ongoing process, and it's meant to be a monitoring piece which can be revised. And for each of the questions, there are 3 potential answers. You're in the planning phase, it's partially implemented or fully implemented. So having these 3 differentials, you know, allows you to track your project progress. So, you know, at the beginning, you may be at the planning phase of, you know, considering sustainability. Then you might have a sustainability plan, and then you might have, by the end of the grant, hopefully have that piece fully implemented. So the progress can be updated. You'll actually go through Section 4 a few times in the second year in order to track your progress. And there also is information such as timeframes, staff, and note section in the implementation section. So we're really hoping that it'll be a resource for you on, you know, who's doing what and how you can track what's going on. For each of these sections, we definitely want, you know, feedback as you're going through it, if things are working for you, if they're useful, if things are not useful. It's really great for us to know because we want to constantly improve this process for grantees. So please feel free to continue to work towards that. The last piece of the planning and implementation guide is appendices with a couple of resources. So really the target of these resources, the first section is research on integrated co-occurring substance use and mental disorders treatment, as well as resources. The second section is optional data measures. So if you're looking for additional measures to collect, this list is a more comprehensive list of things that you can consider when you're looking at what you're collecting as far as data goes. Okay, so next we're going to talk a little bit about the RNR Simulation Tool pilot site. So this project is a partnership from the CSG Justice Center and the Center for Advancing Correctional Excellence, or ACE, at George Mason University. So ACE is the creator of the RNR Simulation Tool, which is a shared decision support tool for reducing recidivism and improving outcomes. They were nice enough to come to the Justice Center and give us an overview of this tool, and we really liked the tool and thought it could be a great opportunity for grantees to look at the ways that they pair individuals in their programs to the correct services, as well as assess their work towards implementation and evidence-based practices. So through this, the ACE, train 2 Justice Center staff members and on the certification for this tool, and they'll be working with the Justice Center TA providers on these pilot sites. So for the pilot sites, there will be 4 selected. 2 will be on-site pilot sites, and 2 will be distant learning pilot sites. So the on-site pilot sites will have 3 different site visits over the course of the 2-year period in order to get trained on the RNR Simulation Tool and have follow-up to look at the results. The distance learning pilot sites will have similar training, but it will be all remotely managed, so through webinars and calls with the TA providers and ACE. So something to note for this is there's no additional funds available for those who would like to apply to be pilot sites, but what we are providing is an opportunity for intensive technical assistance and free access to the RNR Simulation Tool, which we'll talk about a little bit more. We'll also have an adaptive planning and implementation guide that takes into consideration the additional work that you'll have as an RNR Simulation Tool site. So there will be some increased time expectation for those who decide to apply for this because there is intensive training on the RNR Simulation Tool. The grantees who are interested in applying really must be willing and excited about participation in this because it is, you know, an active process of you working with the TA provider as well as ACE on this project. It'll be a competitive application process, which we'll send out the application after this webinar, and I think it's also being sent to you in the chat box, so you can click on it and look at the application process. The criteria is laid out. Essentially, we want to know, why would you want to be a pilot site? You know, what are the goals? How does this help the program reach the strategic goals that they have through the Second Chance Act? We'll also ask you to specify whether you would like to be a distant learning site or an on-site site visit site. The applications are going to be due Tuesday, January 13th, and we hope to let the sites who have been selected know by the end of January. So that's the goal for this. So to talk a little bit more about the RNR Simulation Tool, I will pass it off to Dr. Faye Taxman and Amy Murphy from the Center of Advancing Correctional Excellence at George Mason.
Hi, everyone. This is Faye and Amy. Do you want to say hello? So hard to do these things via phone. So we're going to basically give you a pretty brief overview of the RNR Simulation Tool. Amy's going to run through it, and then Sarah will be following up to send you some additional information. And if you have any questions during this period of time when you're thinking about whether or not you want to be a pilot site or how it might benefit you or something, please feel free to contact Amy or myself. We're both available to talk with you about it. With that, Amy, do you want to start going through the RNR Simulation Tool? Hello?
Amy, are you still on the line?
I wonder if she's having phone issues or something. I see her logged in, but there's an X by that.
See if I can unmute. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes. Now we can hear you.
Excellent. All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. So we're going to be talking about the RNR Simulation Tool, which was developed as a series of translational tools that are designed to help provide decision support for individuals who are working with returning citizens, and it provides support at the jurisdiction, individual, and program level. It's developed by Dr. Taxman and colleagues at George Mason and some other institutions. So we want to talk about some of the common challenges that are encountered in using evidence-based practices and trying to implement evidence-based practices, especially at the system level. So a lot of times you have supervision officers who are basically only providing to their clients something like a checklist of their requirements, or it's very, very sanction-based rather than really focusing on what the individual's needs are. And especially not paying attention to those needs that are criminogenic. We've definitely seen a lot of the time where supervision officers are emphasizing things like vocational training or education because it's, there's generally a lot of programming available in those areas and it's very measurable. However, these are not needs that are really identified as being criminogenic. They're not directly related to an individual's risk of reoffending. So what our tools do is really place the emphasis on those needs that are criminogenic, really helping individuals to prioritize things that are directly related to recidivating. This is the home page for our tools. You can feel free to visit them at any time. You can create a basic account or you can use a test drive function. And I'll be talking about these top three here: assess an individual, the RNR Program Tool for adults, and assess jurisdiction capacity. I'm going to give you a quick overview of each of these, and then I'll go into a little more depth on the assess an individual tool and the RNR Program Tool. And we'll also be talking about a few case studies of jurisdictions or organizations that have used these tools. So this is an example of the output that you get when you use the Assess an Individual tool. This is designed for line officers to use. It can also be used by people who are doing intake for a program. And basically, it is 17 questions. It is very easy and quick to complete. After you answer these 17 questions, you are given, one, the individual's estimated risk for recidivism if you did nothing or if you went about business as usual, as well as programming recommendations for the individual based on their criminogenic needs and their different lifestyle stabilizers and destabilizers. And we'll go through that in a little bit more depth. This is an example of a little bit more of the in-depth output that we provide. So for each of the different programs that are recommended, we can look at how those programs would help the individual to reduce their risk for rearrest or reconviction. It also provides a recommendation for the dosage level that the individual would require. So for example, someone who is high risk and has some serious criminogenic needs, they would obviously be recommended for a type of intensive programming, and then individuals who have maybe more lifestyle stabilizers present might not need such an intense program. And these are some screenshots from the other tools. So the RNR Program Tool is designed to be completed by a program manager or anyone who knows the program very well. It takes about an hour to complete, and generally they need to usually gather some information beforehand. And what it does is it rates a program's adherence to evidence-based practices in 6 different domains. So these 6 domains that you see here in the colorful chart there. And it also provides some recommendations on how that program can improve its adherence to evidence-based practices. And then at the jurisdiction level, we have assessed jurisdiction's capacity, and what that does is it takes a lot of the same questions from the individual tool, but asks them at the jurisdiction level. So rather than saying, is this person high, medium, low risk, we would ask how many people in your jurisdiction are high risk and how many are moderate risk. And then it also measures the needs of the population against the treatment slots that are available in that jurisdiction. So looking at how these apply to the use of evidence-based practices at the system and individual level. Some of the functions of the tool is that it identifies both risk and need, and it identifies both criminogenic needs and other needs. And the output can really provide a mechanism for line officers or for treatment providers to have these discussions with probationers. So talking about the purpose, why are we doing this assessment? Why are we asking you these different questions? Talking about the results, what does it mean to be an individual with a 64% chance of recidivism? What does it mean to say that, we recommend this type of programming for you at this level of intensity? And also how different programming can really impact their success on supervision and on their experience in supervision. So again, back to the home page here. For this, it's intended to build on any risk and needs assessments that you already have in place. If you are currently using, say, the Wisconsin tool or the ORAS as a risk needs assessment, and it's working well for you, then we're not intending to replace that in any way. What this does is really tries to take it a step further and says, well, based on these data that you know about the person, here's how we can put an action plan together. And so it draws from an underlying database of about 20,000 different offender profiles. So if there are missing data about a person, it can be filled in by grabbing basically the profile of an individual who has a lot of similar characteristics to your client. And then it's matching that individual's needs with the programming that's available. So these are some of the questions that are on the Assess an Individual tool. And so on the first page, you would be asked some basic questions about demographics, risk level, and if the individual is part of a special population. So if they're classified as a DUI offender or as a sex offender, we would want to know that distinction. And then we go into the needs in a little bit more depth. This is information that if you are using a risk needs assessment, you can pull some of it from your risk needs assessment, or you can pull some of it from the case files, or you can ask the client about it directly. It can be done as an interview with the individual. And we find that a lot of sites, they like using it with the individual and asking them the questions because it gives them an opportunity to start engaging the client, especially if you're in a jurisdiction where maybe the risk needs assessment is done by a special intake department. So you haven't had that, the probation officer hasn't really had that opportunity to develop a rapport with the individual. And we recommend using this tool at intake with the person and during an initial or an early in the process supervision visit, and then revisiting it a few months down the line, usually about 6 months and then a year, basically as a way to really track their progress and see what kinds of things have changed with the person over time. I don't know if that looks weird on your screen, but it does on mine. So what we've done here is we've put together some different talking points that can be used in terms of reviewing the results of these assessments with a client. So I would never recommend handing a client a sheet of paper that tells them that they have a 64% chance of getting rearrested without having a conversation about that. So this is an opportunity to, one, talk to the client about risk. So what does it mean to be high, moderate, or low risk? What are some of the factors that went into this assessment? You know, what does the client think that these different characteristics really apply to them? And then talk about how, you know, risk is really not their destiny. It is something that can be changed based on the, you know, getting the person into the correct type of programming. And so it's intended to really build on any kind of techniques that the officers have already been trained on, such as motivational interviewing or motivational enhancement. And in addition to that, if you look at the estimates for recidivism reduction here, these are pretty modest estimates. These are estimates that we use based on meta-analytic data and based on an assumption that the programs are going to be of fairly modest quality, because that's something that's been found, you know, both in our developing these tools and you know, and in tools like the CPAI. They're generally programs aren't scoring terribly high in terms of quality, but that's something that we will also address. And this is just a little bit more of the results. So what this looks at is you get the first most appropriate type of programming recommendation. So in the case of this individual, they have a serious substance dependence problem, and you know, their dependence on a drug like crack or meth or heroin is directly tied to their offending behavior. And so what it does, it recommends that this person would enroll in that type of program, and that they would get a moderate dosage level. And that's the dosage level is based both on need as well as the different stabilizers and destabilizers the person has in their life, and also on their criminal risk level. And then from there, it makes additional recommendations for different programming. And the reason we do this is that, you know, one, we know that resources are scarce, so you may not always be able to get the person into the most appropriate type of programming immediately, but maybe you have some slots available in a different type of program. We also know that individuals have really complex needs, and individuals often have a lot of needs. So, so this can also be used in terms of sequencing treatment. So, for example, you have a person here who has a substance dependence, but that's not their only problem. You know, they also have some issues in terms of some criminal thinking, antisocial cognitions, and they also have, you know, they're abusing some other drugs as well. But the fact is they won't really be able to address those smaller problems until they've gotten their main issue really under control. And now, if you're in a jurisdiction where the providers have completed the program tool, which we'll go into next, rather than getting just examples of types of programs here, you would see a list of programs that are available in your jurisdiction. And so from there, you could talk with the client and select, you know, what is the best fit? Which programs have you been through before? What did you like or not like about that option? What do you want to explore here? So, and then another thing that this can really assist with is the case planning. So really, the case plan is the backbone of the supervision process. It allows you to determine what the client's needs are and really prioritize the different needs based on, you know, what is most important in terms of the client's success. It allows you to track more than just compliance. It's not, you know, it doesn't have to be simply, did they show up for their urine test? Were they on time for court? It can be a way to really talk to the individual about their strengths, talk about their accomplishments, talk about the kind of progress they're making. And then, you know, also to really focus on what their treatment needs are and what kind of, you know, long-term goals they may have towards treatment and programming, but also what kind of short-term target behaviors can they work on? What can you accomplish in the next 2 weeks? What can you accomplish in a month versus this very long-term goal that's, you know, can seem very, very far away to them. The next portal here is the RNR Program Tool for adults. And so it is designed to do two things. One, to classify programs based on their primary target, and the second is to assess how well these programs adhere to principles of evidence-based practices. So it can be used to really assess where a program can stand to make improvements in terms of its adherence to evidence-based practices. So it is comparing each program to an ideal program. It's not comparing it to other programs in the jurisdiction. It is based on what the meta-analytic research tells us is effective practice in treating criminal justice-involved populations. It's basically the next generation of tools like the CPAI, CPAP, and it really focuses a lot on the program structure and implementation. So not simply this is a matrix model program or this is an inpatient drug program. It's really trying to get at what is the content of the program, what does a day look like for an individual who is participating in this program. And we recommend doing reassessments as well on this program tool. So a provider could complete the program tool at the beginning of the project, and then maybe 6 months later, 6 months to a year later, they could go in and see, you know, maybe they've made some changes to the program, or you know, or they've just been some incremental changes over time. We would recommend doing a reassessment every 6 months to a year. So what are some of the factors that this program tool is looking at? So we want to know about the target population. Are you trying to treat individuals who are high risk, moderate risk, any type of risk? Is that even part of your consideration? What are the goals here? What are you trying to treat in terms of client needs? What's the theory behind it? And then looking at some of the client level factors. So, you know, how are you assessing clients when they enter your program, and also as they continue through your program? You know, and are you addressing this responsivity factor, this concept that, you know, women will have some different learning styles, and individuals who are younger, individuals who are in that, you know, around 25 and younger category, they're going to you know, they're going to have different learning styles. You're going to want to communicate with them in a different way than, say, you would someone who is in their late 40s and probably ready to desist. And then we look also at the program structure. So, you know, what's the length of the program? What kind of curricula are they using? Looking at the program dosage. And this is an area where, you know, there's definitely a need for a lot more research. But we do want to know the number of total hours that that a client would typically complete for the program, as well as how long they're in it and what the intensity is. So are they, you know, how many hours per week are they receiving? And then we look at implementation issues as well. So things like, what are the staff qualifications? What is in place in order to make sure that the program is being administered with fidelity? What kind of training do the staff have? And what kind of quality assurance measures are in place? So are you taping sessions and then having supervisors review them? Has the program ever been evaluated by an external evaluator? You know, do supervisors sometimes sit in on sessions? That sort of thing. And so all of this goes into what comes out as the program score. So that's basically a report card for them, and we'll show you a little bit about that. So this is a jurisdiction that we worked with in California, and they were able to have, I know that one of the grantees here is also from California, so they'll be familiar when I say it's the AB 109 population for that county. So this county found themselves with an influx of probationers who normally would have been serving their sentences in a state prison, but due to realignment, they were moved to the counties. And but they also came with a good bit of funding. So the county wanted to assess how the programs that treat this population are doing, and also, really get a better lay of the land. What is available here compared to what our needs are. And so they had about 36 programs complete the program tool, and this showed us the distribution of programs. So they have quite a bit of programs available to treat things like moderate substance abuse issues. They also had a good number of programs in the life skilled areas, so things like GED programs. And we also looked at the quality of the program. So this is basically, this slide really sums up the range of scores that we were seeing. So in each domain, programs are assessed from a score of 0% to 100%. So a program can be 100% adherent to the risk principle. And this is looking at their overall scores. So, basically, which is, it tallies the 6 different domains and gives them an overall score. And so here we look at, there's just a huge range in terms of the quality of the programs. So for example, in their programs to treat serious substance dependence, the lowest score a program received was 39, and the highest score was 63%. So this demonstrates a couple things. One is that there's an expectation that most programs are going to be of fairly modest quality. Overall, the average scores that we've been seeing in terms of programs that we've worked with, they tend to score in the 50 to 70% range. But the other thing that I want to highlight here is again, just this range. And so it was a good opportunity for that department to one, figure out, which programs are doing a good job in terms of treating our clients, which ones, should we maybe be pointing more referrals towards, as well as seeing, where they may not have enough programming in place in order to treat the needs of their population. So this is what the initial output looks like for a program that completes the program tool. As you'll see, there's an overall score at the bottom, and then there are these other scores which basically assess their compliance with these different principles. So in the case of this program, they were very low in terms of dosage, and they were doing better in terms of the risk principle and responsivity and restrictiveness. So really, what I like about this tool is you can see the overall score is not super meaningful. It's much more important to be able to go in and look at what are the areas where the program may be somewhat weak. So in addition to the initial output, for each domain, the program can click on the colored results, so they could click, in this case, on implementation. And what they get here is one, kind of a generic paragraph that describes what does it mean to be a program that is high in terms of its implementation. What does it mean to be a program that is well implemented? And then following that, there's a series of bullet points which are based on how that program actually responded to the question. So in this case, this program had not been evaluated by an external evaluator, and that's one way that program could improve. Another way it could improve its implementation score would be to develop a treatment manual or to purchase a treatment manual that they would use that would really guide how the program is done. This is another example from a different program in the same jurisdiction. So this is a drug court in Texas, and again we see they have a high to moderate implementation score, and they certainly have room for improvement. So in this case, it's a program that would benefit from receiving some technical assistance. They would also benefit from having an evaluator, And one of the issues here was that there are completion criteria. So an individual would complete this program based on length of time. And one of the recommendations here would be to change it to someone's successful completion of each of the requirements or someone's reduction in symptoms. So, and then we have a couple of different specialized outputs. This is an example of the specialized output for specialty courts. So drug courts, veterans courts, mental health courts, any kind of specialized court you have. And this measures how the specialized court adheres to principles put out by the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. And so for each of these categories, the program would receive either a green check, meaning they're doing very well in that, according to that principle, a yellow caution sign, which means they're doing some things well, but they have room for improvement, or, which you don't see here, a red X, which indicates that they're really not adhering to that principle, and they need to make some improvements in that area. So here we really want to talk about how key the treatment matching is. So really putting the right person in the best type of program. So figuring out what is this individual's needs, what kind of what's the home environment like, what are the ancillary needs that this person has, and how can we really incorporate that. I've seen a number of jurisdictions where, they don't have a great deal of information about measuring or treating criminal thinking, or they don't really have programming available for it. And as a result, everyone is recommended for substance abuse treatment. So even if that's not really what's driving their offending, that's, what they're sent to because that's what's available. For this, we really want to make it easier for line officers or jurisdictions to be able to match their probationers, to match their clients to the best type of programming. The final portal, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, is the Assess Jurisdiction Capacity portal. And basically, that takes questions that are very similar to what you saw on the Assess an Individual tool, but it asks them at the jurisdiction level. So there's 18 questions involved, and you would so it's, for example, things like what percentage of your population has a co-occurring mental health disorder, what percentage has a criminal thinking disorder, what percentage have completed high school, that sort of thing. And from there, we are able to estimate what are the needs at the jurisdiction level. So if you look here at this, at the purple, this is an example of a county where there was a great deal of need for intensive substance abuse treatment. And then if you look at the blue overlay, that demonstrates what is currently available in terms of programming there. And so what you're seeing is not all that uncommon in that they have more programming available in some of the less intensive categories. So really, as you move further to the right on the graph, the programs tend to be less intensive, and those programs aren't addressing a criminogenic need. They're addressing more things like life skills. And so this tool enables a jurisdiction to see, where they might need to reallocate some of their treatment dollars, and where they might need to maybe issue some additional RFPs in order to better serve their justice population. And this is another example. As you can see, the prior jurisdiction was more program rich than this one. So here you see that there's less of a need for serious substance dependence treatment. There is a bigger need for criminal thinking treatment. But the main thing here is that there's so little available for this jurisdiction. So it's an area where this is something that the jurisdiction could use to advocate for themselves. They could go to the county and say, look at how little treatment we have available for our clientele, and make an argument in terms of what kind of increases for funding they required. So, and then we just wanted to very briefly touch upon another part of the CJ Track portal. So this is separate from the RNR Simulation Tool, but can be, it's a very complementary system to it. I'm not going to go into any detail about it, but basically, if you have a community, if you have a jurisdiction where a lot of the officers or even the treatment providers do not have a really strong base in terms of understanding evidence-based practices, especially the risk-needs-responsivity principles, then this is an e-learning system that they could access that goes through these five different areas. It's a system where they can learn it on their own and progress through basic, intermediate, and advanced skill levels. It's designed to be completed on their own. There's also a coaching component to it where often supervisors, sometimes peers, act as coaches to help with the uptake of knowledge of these different areas. And this is just a little sample of what the soaring looks like. And this is just a brief description of how individuals who went through the program, through the soaring program, were able to change their uptake of skills in these different areas. And so that's our presentation on RNR, and we're happy to take any questions either now or via email, or if you'd like to follow up with us over the phone, that's great too.
Thank you so much, Amy and Faye, for letting us know a little bit more about the RNR Simulation Tool. So actually, we are moving to questions and answers now. So if you have questions for the Justice Center or you have questions for George Mason, you can feel free to ask them now. I noticed in the chat box that Paul Tracy has a question, so perhaps we'll start with him. Mr. Tracy, are you able to ask your question? Okay, so we're not hearing Mr. Tracy, so you can also type your question into the chat box. So if we're unable to hear you, which I think that's the case, please just type your question. So one person asked, will the presentation be posted at a later date? Yes, the presentation will be posted online, and we'll also email it out to all of the grantees so they have a copy of the presentation. I know particularly on the RNR Simulation Tool, pilot site information that'll be very useful to have so you can discuss with your jurisdiction whether you would like to apply to be a pilot site. Okay, do we have any other questions?
Well, I see a question about, it says, is there a gender-specific component to the assessment tool? And so, yes, on the Assess an Individual tool, we do ask about gender, because we know that the recidivism numbers are going to be different for women versus men, and they also have different pathways to offending. So we do take that into consideration in the model. And we also ask in the program tool, you know, whether the program is you know, having mixed groups, or if they're treating you know, people of different genders separately, if there's, you know, one gender that they cater to.
Thank you, Amy. And I think we actually have another question as well. So this question is, how should we use the RNR Simulation Tool with other tools that we're already using, such as TCU, in order to avoid redundancy?
Okay, that is a great question. So what you would want to do is, you know, if you have your TCU assessment, you can use that to answer some of the questions on the assessed individual. So, for example, if you're using the TCU drug screen, rather than going back and re-asking the client, you know, do you have a serious drug problem, or you know, are you abusing drugs, you would be able to populate it using your TCU drug screen data.
So when I went through the training for this, one thing that I found that was really cool is I think it's very complementary to the screening and assessment tools that you're using for criminogenic risk, as well as substance use and mental disorder services. I think the RNR Simulation Tool seems to do a good job of taking that information and helping you, you know, identify appropriate services and programs for the individual. So another question we have is, so I think this is similar to the last one, is CAPE 5 tool comparable to the RNR tool?
Okay, now I'm assuming that's that's the assessment tool used. So yeah, basically our tool is compatible with a number of different tools, and one of the ways that I often recommend for individuals to use it is, you know, rather than sitting with the client and going through every question, is one thing you can do is take assessments that you've already done, and, you know, complete the assessment individual tool based on what you have in front of you, and then once you're meeting with the client, to go back and fill in anything that you may not have captured on the other tool. So maybe the tool you were using assessed you know, substance abuse and education, but it didn't ask about whether the person has criminal peers and you know, what their current housing situation is. So you could go and fill that in with you know, both data that you already have and through conversations with the individual.
So I think, this is Faye. So I wanted to add to what Amy and Sarah were talking about. So in the Assess the Individual, we really, you know, it's to build on your current assessment tools that an organization or program is currently using. What we tried to do is add in questions that would be very helpful in terms of treatment matching or trying to deal with some types of stabilization, case management services that really help the client, that typically aren't, particularly in criminal justice type tools. So there's questions about housing stability, food stability, issues related to, you know, medications that people might be taking. Those are just relevant because they help us in this notion about really what kinds of services does a person need to kind of stabilize themselves, as well as to address some of their, you know, substance abuse or co-occurring issues. So it complements, it doesn't replace assessment tools, and I think it's important for people to understand about the complementary nature of it.
Thank you so much, and I think someone else actually just asked that question of will they be able to use it in coordination with the University of Cincinnati CPC Fidelity tool. And so I think what you just said is really important to note, that this is an enhancement and you can use all of those screening and assessment tools as a part of this process.
Yeah, and if people are using the CPC, for example, from a program tool, what this does, it has more behavioral health factors built into it than the CPC, and we can, you know, in working with a site, we can really help them, not so they duplicate efforts, because, you know, we have several users that have used the CPC in the past, and so, you know, we know ways about, you know, trying to shortcut, so, you know, we're appreciative of people's time and effort, but really helps them kind of use the tools in the best way possible.
Thank you. And I think this question is similar too, but it's, will a pilot site have to use ACE tools? So just to reiterate it, the RNR Simulation Tool, you can still use the screening and assessment tools you use for criminogenic risk and behavioral health. This really is a decision-making tool that helps you match based on appropriate programs. Okay, so do we have any other questions? And there's a chat box at the bottom where it says question and answers. And if you're listening to audio through your computer rather than having called in, you're going to have to send us the question through your chat box because we'll be unable to hear you. If you called in on the phone, you can feel free to just speak up and we'll be able to hear your question.
Oh, and actually one more question. Oh, sorry, just I see a question asking, is the assess the individual portion used by officers, correctional staff? Yeah, it's designed for use by line officers. It can also be used by treatment providers.
Thank you. So are there any more questions? You can feel free to enter the questions into the chat box at the bottom right. We'll give you about 1 or 2 more minutes if you have any additional questions. Or you can feel free to follow up with the Justice Center or ACE via email as well after if there are questions that come up as your jurisdiction is deciding whether you should apply for this pilot site opportunity. Okay, so I'm not seeing any additional questions. So if you have any other questions on the pilot sites, you can feel free to follow up with us or the or ACE. We will send out the application for the pilot sites following the webinar. For questions on the co-occurring disorder planning and implementation guide, we'll certainly discuss that more on the upcoming orientation call you have with your TA provider, as well as we can field any questions on the planning and implementation guide through email as well. So thank you so much to George Mason University for partnering up with us on this, and thanks to Amy and Faye for helping us and for working with us on this pilot site opportunity. If anyone has any additional questions, we have listed our contact information on that last slide, or you can feel free to email Mark Stovall, who you've been communicating with on planning the orientation call. Any final thoughts, Amy?
No, thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to answering any of your questions and hopefully working with several of you in the future.
Well, thanks so much, Amy, and thank you to all the grantees for joining us. Congratulations again on the Second Chance Act grant. It's a very competitive process. We're looking forward to providing training and technical assistance to you over the course of the next 2 years. So have a great day.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye.